She is clearly the one who skips class the most. Yet, surprisingly, every time an exam rolls around, she always shows up right on time. But just as the girl is focusing on her test, the teacher unexpectedly tries to take her paper away. The teacher believes she barely attended any classes, so she must not know how to solve a single problem. However, the girl speaks up with absolute confidence.
I'll take it. It doesn't look that hard.
Thinking the girl is just being stubborn and talking big, the teacher decides not to force the issue. But she feels certain that the girl's grade will be rock bottom. But she never expects that once the scores come out, she is completely dumbfounded. Because the girl actually gets a perfect score. The teacher never imagines that this girl, who usually reeks of an awful stench and loves cutting class, harbors such breathtaking talent. So, she decides on the spot to nurture this girl of limitless potential, strictly requiring her to come to class every single day, or else she will contact Child Protective Services to step in. Yet the teacher's warning fills Liz with sheer terror. Because her mother, Jean, is a substance-dependent individual, and whenever her cravings kick in and go unsatisfied, she develops an uncontrollable violent streak, accompanied by a certain degree of schizophrenia. No matter how her older sister Lisa tries every possible way to soothe her, she cannot pull their mother back from her out-of-control state. Meanwhile, her father, Peter, always acts like it is none of his business, staring coldly at a game show on TV. Whenever this happens, Liz can only frantically pull out some change, trying to distract her mother's attention. But this money is the government welfare check, which is also the only source of income for the family. Once this money is taken by their mother, the two sisters will have to starve. Although Jean fights with all her might to grab it, her weak, sickly body is ultimately no match for the combined strength of Lisa and Liz, leaving her slumping helplessly on the floor. Yet looking at her mother's pitiful begging and near-desperate state, Liz cannot help but soften her heart, hesitantly handing the money over to her. But the moment Jean gets the money, the pleading look on her face instantly vanishes, replaced by a creepy smile as she turns around and stumbles out the door to buy illicit goods. By the time Liz snaps back to reality, it hits her hard. That is their survival money. Left with no choice, she can only beg her father to help get that money back. Yet when Peter finds Jean, instead of pulling his wife out of the swamp, he sinks right into it with her, completely forgetting about his daughter who is trailing close behind. Facing parents this pathetic, Liz can only watch from a distance in utter despair. When she spots the leftovers in a trash can, hunger forces her to swallow them down in huge gulps. She assumes this dark, hopeless life will go on forever, but she never expects that early the next morning, blaring sirens will shatter the silence. The moment the police step through the door, they restrain Jean, even giving her a sedative without saying a word. Liz is completely terrified and thrown into a panic by this sudden turn of events. Little does she know, Peter secretly reported his wife just so he could enjoy himself alone. And he stands there like a total outsider, gloating as his wife is taken away. However, a female social worker arrives at the same time. She looks around the utterly filthy home, where the bathroom is overflowing with dirty water and cigarette butts, making the entire scene absolutely shocking to the eye. The social worker seriously tells Liz not to skip school anymore, warning her that she will be sent to a shelter if she misses another class. But Liz does not care about any of this right now, as the only thing she minds is her mother, who is about to be separated from her. She tries to rush forward to block the police, but her strength is too tiny to shake the cruel reality before her eyes, leaving her to watch helplessly as her mother's figure fades into the distance. In the end, Liz has no choice but to follow the social worker's advice and go back to school, because that is her only way out right now. But every time she steps into the classroom, Liz is always rejected and shunned by her classmates. Without her mother's care, she wears filthy clothes every day, and her head is even crawling with lice. The powerful stench makes her classmates avoid her like the plague, while mockery and exclusion follow her like a shadow, which also becomes the reason why she repeatedly skips class. Only when there is an exam does she come to school. After school on this day, Liz clutches that perfect exam paper, running excitedly to her neighbor, Eva, to share the joy. Eva's smile is full of relief and pride. It turns out that all this time, Eva would pick up the old books discarded by others, organize them carefully, and give them to Liz right away. And Liz, naturally, loves reading to her core, so despite being only 7 years old, she has already read quite a few books. Yet just as Liz is soaking in this happiness, Eva suddenly tells her a piece of good news.
Now your mother's back.
Liz runs upstairs in pure ecstasy, her heart full of eager anticipation for her mother's return to a stable life. But the moment she pushes the door open, the room remains an absolute wreck, with the heavy stench of smoke drifting from the table, while her mother sits silently on the couch, covered in horrifying scars. Clearly, she has just endured a thoroughly miserable time at the rehab center. Liz walks anxiously to her mother's side, pulling out her perfect exam paper to share it. Liz expects her mother to flash a long-awaited smile, but instead of showing any relief, her mother's face is plagued with sorrow as she keeps apologizing to Liz. It turns out that she tested positive for HIV while at the rehab center. This news is like a sharp blade, stabbing fiercely into Liz's heart, causing all her hopes to shatter into pieces. To get better treatment, she decides to separate from Peter, intending to take the sisters to move into their grandfather's house. But upon hearing this, Liz instantly falls into extreme panic. The sheer brutality of her grandfather, Pops, when he physically abused her mother, is a shadow she can never wipe away. She is even more terrified of the predatory, creepy looks her grandfather gives the sisters. Despite Liz's begging and crying for her to stay, her mother's mind is made up, and she ruthlessly turns to leave, leaving Liz standing all alone in the empty room, her heart filled with helplessness and despair. In the days that follow, Liz can only rely on tap water to soak crackers just to barely stave off her hunger. However, long-term malnutrition, combined with the loneliness and terror in her soul, leaves her with no strength to step through the school gates. She thinks these gray days will go on forever, but unexpectedly, a month later, workers from Child Protective Services show up at her door. It turns out that because of her long-term truancy, the teacher actually reported her. When the worker states clearly that Liz's parents are incapable of taking good care of the child and decides to send her to a shelter, Liz instantly feels an overwhelming panic. She comes up with a quick lie, claiming that her father has started to change and now has enough responsibility to let her live a good life. But Peter, standing right beside her, does not offer a single word of defense or try to keep her, instead packing Liz's bags without hesitation. In his selfish mind, Liz has always been a burden holding him back from enjoying himself alone. Facing such a cold and dismissive attitude from Liz's father, the worker concludes that instead of letting her struggle in an environment so starved of love, it is better to send her straight to a shelter. As she leaves, Liz stares at her father with tears streaming down her face, desperately wishing he would say just one word to make her stay. But in the end, all she gets is his icy, disgusted glare. Just like that, the girl who should have been protected by her parents becomes a completely helpless orphan. Yet the gears of fate also undergo an unexpected shift at this exact moment. She thinks that no matter how bad a shelter is, it is at least a place to barely stay. But Liz still underestimates the darkness of the bottom of society. On her very first day stepping into this place, she is given a brutal reality check. Not a single person around steps in to stop it, as they all just stand by and watch the joke. There is absolutely none of the warmth of a shelter here, as it looks more like an unmanaged women's prison, where violence and bullying run wild every single day. In order to avoid becoming a target of bullying, Liz has no choice but to swallow her pride, silently taking on all the dirty and exhausting work that nobody else wants to do. She knows clearly in her heart that only by doing this can she barely win a sliver of survival space. On this day, as she is cleaning up like usual, she sees a girl walking fiercely into the bathroom, pouring bleach into someone else's shampoo bottle without a word. Liz is frozen stiff with fear, not daring to utter a single word, leaving her to watch helplessly as the girl in the bathroom applies the shampoo. In the next second, a gut-wrenching scream echoes through the entire bathroom. Just like that, amidst the daily terror and anxiety, Liz survives the hardest time of her life. After 6 long years, like a prisoner breaking free from chains, she finally leaves that suffocating shelter. To be able to live with her mother again in the future, Liz suppresses the timidity deep in her heart, gathering the courage to step into her grandfather's house. But just as she walks into the hallway, she bumps right into her grandfather, who is heading out to throw away the trash. Having not seen each other for a long time, they do not exchange a single word of greeting, only passing each other in silence. The moment Liz sees her mother, she can no longer hold back the surging longing in her heart, rushing forward to hug her mother tightly. The barrier and yearning of 7 years seem to melt away completely in this instant. They walk side by side down the noisy street, and the strange yet familiar companionship of family makes Liz temporarily forget the shadows of the past, replaced by the pure, beautiful memories of her childhood. Seeing that the vibe is right, Liz takes the chance to urge her mother to make up with her father, so the whole family can be reunited again. But upon hearing this, her mother's face suddenly turns dead serious. Little does she know, because her father could not afford the rent, he was forced to move into a homeless shelter years ago, and their home has long ceased to exist. However, before Jean can finish her words, her expression suddenly becomes dazed and restless, and she quickly leaves after making an excuse. That familiar, frantic look makes Liz instantly realize something is wrong. Though she does not want to face the worst-case scenario, she cannot suppress her curiosity and quietly follows her. To her disappointment, her mother has fallen back into alcoholism. Completely let down, Liz feels a wave of suffocation, but she does not step forward to disrupt her, knowing that no amount of persuasion can change anything. Filled with sadness and confusion, she decides to go back and look at their old home, since that place holds the most precious memories of their family. But looking at the ruined, desolate house before her, Liz finally understands that no matter how stubborn she is, she cannot bring her family back to the way they used to be. Shortly after, accompanied by her mother, Liz walks into an unfamiliar new school. She thinks that as long as she cleans herself up nicely, she will no longer face the kind of exclusion she did before. But having been away from school for so long, she has no idea how to blend into the classroom dynamic, looking completely flustered even when the teacher asks questions. Fortunately, a classmate named Chris steps up to bail her out. This sudden kindness makes Liz feel incredibly warm. Through their smooth, daily interactions, Chris shares that she also has an equally tragic life. The two kids, bonding over their shared misery, seem to have a natural chemistry, becoming best friends who talk about everything before long. To truly blend into the group, Liz specially invites her classmates over to her grandfather's house. But just as everyone is having a blast, her dead drunk mother suddenly pushes the door open. Not only does she reek of alcohol, but she also vomits all over the room, leaving a complete mess. The classmates are terrified and clueless, and in the end, the party can only break up on a bad note. However, Chris does not choose to leave, instead staying behind to clean up the mess and take care of Liz's mother with her. This loyal, unwavering bond makes their friendship even more unbreakable. But when Pops comes back and finds a strange girl in the house, he rushes forward to kick her out without a second thought, even shoving Liz to the ground when she tries to stop him, yelling foul insults from his mouth. Liz can no longer endure her grandfather's insults and abuse, instantly turning around to run to her room, pack her bags, and decide to leave this suffocating home. However, her resoluteness only makes Pops even more infuriated as he viciously hurls a parting shot. Just like that, Liz becomes an orphan with living parents once again. But this time, Liz is no longer afraid, nor is she alone anymore, because with Chris by her side, she finally has the courage to face the unknown and the suffering. In the days that follow, Liz is completely reduced to a transient vagrant, never stepping foot through the school gates ever again. During the day, she begs passers-by for handouts on the streets, and at night, a corner of the subway becomes her temporary sanctuary. But when begging is not enough to keep her stomach full, she has to resort to shoplifting just to scratch out a living. Even though her life is filled with absolute despair and confusion, Liz's longing for her mother never fades, as it is an unbreakable bond of blood. So, whenever her grandfather goes out, she always sneaks over to his house to take care of her weak, sickly mother. She assumes this secret companionship can go on forever, but she never expects that a sudden tragedy will catch her completely off guard. On one ordinary evening, Liz waits at the top of the stairs for a very long time, yet she never sees her mother's familiar figure appear. A wave of intense anxiety surges into her heart like a tidal wave, prompting her to rush immediately to the bar her mother usually frequents, hoping to find any trace of her there. But the moment she arrives at the front counter, before she can even open her mouth to ask, the bartender coldly informs her that her mother passed away just yesterday. This news hits her like a bolt from the blue, instantly shattering the resilience Liz has forced herself to maintain for so long. Suppressing her gut-wrenching grief, she dashes out of the bar, sprinting through the streets like an empty shell that has lost its soul. Before she knows it, she runs onto an abandoned rooftop and breaks down into loud, sobbing tears. At this very moment, all her grievances and resentment pour out completely. The maternal love she has always yearned for but never truly possessed ultimately turns into an eternal regret in this sudden, devastating conclusion. On the day of Jean's funeral, the scene is heartbreakingly desolate. Because Pops refuses to put up any money to handle the arrangements, Jean can only be buried alongside a group of deceased strangers. There is no proper ceremony, let alone a priest's prayers and blessings. However, before the coffin even goes into the ground, Pops pulls Lisa away and leaves in a hurry, without a single shred of lingering attachment. Meanwhile, before walking away, Chris suddenly tells Liz that she has long been sick and tired of this transient life, planning to head to a shelter to find a stable roof over her head. Liz knows full well in her heart that stepping into a shelter means being stripped of her remaining freedom, where she might spend the rest of her days enduring violence and bullying. But faced with Chris's unwavering determination, she does not try to talk her out of it too much. In the end, amidst silent understanding and mutual respect, they quietly choose to go their separate ways. As Liz stares at the casket about to be buried under the yellow dirt, the grief and reluctance in her heart surge like a tidal wave. Without a moment's hesitation, she leaps onto her mother's coffin and lies flat on top of it, as if she can feel the residual warmth of maternal love one last time. However, the repeated urging of the graveyard workers shatters this brief final moment together. Liz has no choice but to awkwardly scramble out of the pit, her hands trembling as she scoops up 2 handfuls of dirt to scatter over the coffin, bidding her mother a final farewell. By the following year, the burial ground is completely overgrown with wild weeds, and this plot of land no longer bears any trace of her mother's existence. Liz suddenly comes to the realization that if she keeps spiraling downward like this, she is highly likely to end up meeting the exact same tragic fate. She knows she must make a change, or else she can never break free from the shackles of destiny. Therefore, Liz decides to reach out to Eva for help. Before long, Eva gets her in touch with a local high school. But fate loves to play cruel tricks on people, as the long distance combined with an unexpected traffic jam causes Liz to miss her scheduled interview time. By the time Liz arrives at the office completely out of breath, the principal has already begun the final round of evaluations, and the assistant coldly rejects her plea for an interview. Yet, she refuses to give up just like that. With absolute conviction in her voice, she argues that the original purpose of a school is to promote educational equity in the community, and they cannot simply shut the door on a girl whose entire heart is set on learning. She just wants a single opportunity. Against all odds, Liz's sheer persistence and sincerity manage to win the assistant over. As a result, the assistant makes an exception and allows her to fill out the application form. Liz knows deep down that this is her absolute last shot, and missing it means she can never turn her life around. She fills every inch of the form with her desperate longing for an education. The exact moment the principal steps out of the office, Liz rushes straight up to him, begging him to give her just 30 seconds to prove her potential and determination. She pours her heart out to the principal about her rocky past and her family's crushing hardships, explaining how she now fiercely yearns to walk toward a brighter future. After listening, the principal curiously inquires what exactly anchors her to want such a desperate change. Liz hesitates for a brief moment, but ultimately uncovers the deepest scar in her heart. Her mother's passing makes her realize completely that only knowledge can rewrite her destiny. Deeply moved by Liz's raw honesty and resilience, the principal accepts her on the spot. Liz is so incredibly thrilled that she becomes utterly incoherent, feeling as though the dawn of a new future is finally beckoning her forward. But just when she thinks every single hurdle has been cleared, the principal suddenly drops a bombshell, informing her that an underage student's enrollment must be processed by their father in person. For Liz, this is undoubtedly a monumental hurdle. After agonizing and hesitating over it repeatedly, Liz ultimately goes to the shelter to track down her father. However, this reunion, after years of separation, brings Peter not a single shred of joy or emotion, acting instead like a thick wall standing between them, as an unspeakable estrangement fills the air. Fortunately, the conscience in his heart is not completely dead, and he successfully helps Liz complete her enrollment paperwork. As they step outside the school, looking at his now graceful and grown daughter, a wave of guilt ripples through Peter's cloudy eyes for the very first time. He suddenly realizes how his past cowardice and irresponsibility have inflicted deep, agonizing trauma on his daughter's upbringing. At this exact moment, he finally offers an apology to Liz, his tone filled with absolute earnestness to make up for his regrets. But Liz does not blame him at all, because in her heart, family ties are always a resilient and forgiving bond that no amount of time or stacked misreadings can ever sever when it comes to bloodline connections. So, she opens up her heart to her father for the very first time. As they part ways, Peter implores Liz to study hard and absolutely never live a muddled, wasted life like he did. Watching her father's slouched, retreating figure, Liz's eyes well up with tears. Those are tears from the bittersweet bite of reunion, regrets over the past, and above all, hopeful anticipation for the future. In the days that follow, she completely submerges herself in the ocean of knowledge. Although she has barely had a few years of formal schooling, she possesses a mind-blowing talent for comprehension and a relentless drive for academic grinding. In a remarkably short span of time, she patches up all her past academic shortcomings one by one, making progress at a speed that leaves even the principal thoroughly amazed. But Liz's ultimate goal stretches far beyond this, as she goes as far as setting a strict rule for herself to finish 4 years' worth of 10 courses in just 2 years. During this period, whether she is at school or on the subway, she never lets a single learning opportunity slip by. Even while working her shift at a restaurant, Liz hangs her textbook right next to the sink, racing against the clock to absorb knowledge. To save precious commuting time, she simply turns the subway cars into her temporary living quarters. When a mind hungry for knowledge is set ablaze by a dream, it bursts forth with boundless energy. Just as Liz is pushing forward to chase her dream, out of nowhere, she unexpectedly crosses paths with a completely aimless Chris. Determined to throw her friend a lifeline, Liz brings her along to her own school, hoping that she can find a sense of direction in life here too. Right at this moment, the principal brings some fantastic news that the higher-ups are organizing a trip for the top 10 students in the grade to visit Harvard University. But upon hearing this, Liz feels a deep wave of disappointment, believing that with her current abilities, it is completely impossible to break into the top 10.
Well, you're not one of the top. You're the top.
The principal's words leave Liz in total disbelief, never imagining that she too would have a day where she stands at the very peak. However, this sudden pleasant surprise is instantly doused in cold water by Chris, who feels that Liz should have bowed her head to reality a long time ago, arguing there is absolutely no point in torturing herself by wasting time and energy on studying. In her eyes, growing up to be a janitor is not bad at all. Despite being two girls who grew up struggling at the absolute bottom of society, standing at the crossroads of life, they make choices that are diametrically opposed to each other. Liz chooses to bravely challenge her fate and rewrite her life using the power of knowledge, whereas Chris takes a passive approach by throwing in the towel, letting life drag her down into a downward spiral. Under the leadership of the principal, Liz finally steps into the highly anticipated Harvard University. The campus exudes an understated academic charm everywhere, with students full of confidence and passion for knowledge, as a thick atmosphere of debate and exploration washes over her. This instantly gives Liz a sense of being hopelessly outclassed, making her secretly doubt whether she is worthy of the deep heritage of this top-tier institution. Just as she sinks into self-doubt, the principal softly says that the dazzling aura of this prestigious school is merely an outsider's misinterpretation, and that everyone here is just as ordinary as she is, having only reached this height through day in and day out grinding. Heaven never fails anyone who strives to chase the light, and as long as one harbors passion and keeps moving forward, everyone has the right to reach out and touch their dreams. These words from the principal instantly clear up Liz's mind. She has been knocked down by fate countless times, but even when pushed to the cliff of despair, she always manages to get back up resiliently. This time, why not try to climb this peak that symbolizes glory? Consequently, Liz completely solidifies her determination to get into Harvard. However, the exorbitant tuition fees required for college become yet another chasm stretching out in front of her, as relying solely on standard scholarships is absolutely a drop in the bucket. Just when she feels hope is fading and is almost about to throw in the towel, the principal's assistant unexpectedly hands her a notice for the New York Times scholarship. Applicants only need to submit an essay about overcoming their own hardships, and once successfully selected, they can receive a $12,000 scholarship every year for 4 consecutive years. Although the competition for the award is incredibly fierce, Liz still decides to give it her all, since this is her one and only shot at knocking on Harvard's door. In order to deliver the most heartfelt submission, Liz spends a full 3 months polishing it, finally mailing the essay out just the day before the deadline. This day happens to be her 18th birthday. She hopes this piece of writing, brimming with her original aspirations, can serve as her most meaningful coming-of-age gift. In her essay, Liz recounts her rocky past, using her first-hand experiences to express her thirst for knowledge and her obsession with rewriting her destiny, with every single word carrying her burning conviction. And her sincerity and resilience finally earn the favor of destiny. Following multiple rounds of rigorous screening, she actually manages to break into the finals, taking a massive step closer to her dream. Before the interview, Liz reaches out to her older sister on her own initiative, hoping to borrow a decent outfit to leave a great impression on the interviewers. Hearing this, Lisa does not hesitate for a single second, handing over her most presentable coat straight to her. Even though the two sisters have not seen each other for years, this bond of familial love has never faded. However, the moment Liz steps out the door, she unexpectedly runs into Chris, who has just been kicked out of the shelter. Chris begs helplessly for some help, but since Liz is in a rush to get to her interview, she can only offer some hurried comfort, saying she will take her to the school to seek assistance as soon as the interview wraps up. Yet, this brief delay actually sets off Chris's fury. She lashes out at Liz, calling her ungrateful and mocking her by saying it is completely impossible for her to ever get into Harvard. Faced with a Chris who has completely lost her mind, Liz does not offer much of a defense. At this very moment, she must stand firm in her dream, as absolutely nothing can block her steps forward. As the interview officially begins, Liz makes no attempt to hide her rocky past. She speaks with absolute honesty, sharing that the most precious harvest of her life is learning resilience and forgiveness from her parents' hardships. Although her life has been filled with instability and deprivation, she has never once doubted the deep love between her and her parents. Liz's openness and bravery move the judges one after another. For a girl dragged into the abyss by her family of origin, not only can she break free from the trap by relying on her own hard work, but she still deeply loves the parents who gave her pain. So how many people in this world can truly be this broad-minded and pure? In the end, Liz successfully blows away all the judges, smoothly securing this scholarship and taking a rock-solid step toward her Harvard dream. At the award ceremony, a reporter questions Liz about the secret behind making her dream come true. Her response is calm, yet powerful, stating that although her childhood is a tragic scar on her life, those insurmountable adversities are exactly her hardest armor, forcing her to constantly break out of desperate situations and fight to grow. But the reporter's next question strikes right at the bottom of her heart, asking what she would most want to change if she could rewrite the past. Liz falls into a brief silence.
I'd give it back. All of it. If I could have my family back.
Everyone is deeply touched by Liz's purity and loyalty, believing that her ability to still hold on to her true self amidst adversity is truly rare and precious. The exact moment Liz turns around to leave, the tears she has been holding back for so long finally burst through the floodgates. That is a sense of release toward her past suffering, and above all, a bone-deep longing for her mother. Even though she has achieved eye-catching success, in her heart, the warmth and wholeness of a family remain a void that can never be filled. Not long after, Liz passes her exams with flying colors and enrolls in Harvard University. That ideal temple, which once seemed completely out of reach, finally radiates true brilliance in her life. Yet, she does not halt her steps forward, continuing to grind on her path of chasing dreams until she clinches a doctorate degree in psychology. This movie is adapted from real events. Relying on a level of resilience and willpower that goes far beyond ordinary people, Liz completes an incredible underdog triumph against the wind. Even after achieving fame and success, she always protects the family ties and friendship buried deep in her heart, not only bringing her father back to live in her own apartment, but also going all out to help her close friend Chris break out of her hardships and walk toward a bright life. This is a highly inspiring movie that leaves people with tears streaming down their faces. Liz's life seems tightly nailed by fate into the muddy abyss, where her mother is deeply trapped in a state of dependency on illicit goods from which she cannot extricate herself. Her father remains cold and ruthless, the shelter is rampant with violence, and even the leftover scraps from a trash can turn into an absolute luxury. The reason why her awakening is shocking lies in the fact that even when being called garbage and turning into a drifter, she still dares to shout out the courage and obsession of wanting to go to school. Perhaps some people feel she should just accept her fate, but a struggle chosen on one's own initiative is far more precious than bowing one's head to destiny. Liz's story lets us understand that everyone runs into hardships, but as long as you refuse to admit defeat, there is always a chance to turn the tables. At the end of the film, the sight of Liz walking into Harvard is the ultimate answer for every single person chasing the light. True strength is the stubbornness and grit to still fight like crazy to climb toward the light after falling straight into the abyss. This kind of resilience, where one refuses to let go of their dream, even when both hands are covered in filth, is the most powerful weapon for an ordinary person to fight back against fate. A good movie is worth your experience of the complete plot, and I look forward to our next meeting.